Welcome to Diary of a CIO. My name is Sam Ebrahim. I'm the Executive General Manager of New South Wales for 𝐸𝐿𝐾, a national recruitment business. The reason for this podcast is after 20 years in the industry, I've seen a gap in the market. There's a lot of information online around technology transformations, agile transformations. What I've seen is a big gap in the market around the stories behind the job title. So I've created this podcast to interview CIOs across Australia, understand their purpose, their vision, their journeys to how they got to where they are today, with the intention of inspiring the next generation of CIOs across Australia. With that in mind, I'd love to welcome my guest today, is Sheridan Ware. Sheridan is someone that I met around 2 years ago at a Women in Technology Leadership program that we were running to promote diversity across the technology sector in Sydney. So with that in mind, welcome to the show, Sheridan.
Thank you so much, Sam.
And just a little bit of background in terms of where you are today before we launch into the podcast.
Yeah, right now I'm the chair of the Sustainable Digitalisation Project, but prior to that I was the CIO at Charter Hall.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. And today's podcast, we're going to be covering your journey to CIO, where you've come from, which is a little bit of an unusual journey to typical technology leaders, your rise to CIO of the Year for Australia for 2023, which was an exceptional achievement, and also your journey through that period at CIO leadership to where you are today, the great times, the challenging times, and how you overcame them and became the person you are today. So thank you. Just a little bit more of an intro in terms of your background to the point of where you are today. Be really appreciative for our listeners.
Yeah, I actually didn't start in technology. As you said, I've had a bit of a strange pathway into the CIO, but I actually started as a journalist, which was all I wanted to be when I was growing up. What I didn't want to be by the time I finished my journalism studies was a journalist. But I went into online journalism, and from there was able to move into sort of business analysis and project management and change management in terms of rolling out technology. Back then, it was all about being online. And so what we were actually rolling out was content management systems as, corporates developed their first website or governments were going online. And so we helped them do that through this content management system. But what was happening was people who didn't even know what a web browser were really struggling to understand not just how to work with the content management system, but the change that was happening more broadly. And we saw this gap where we said, if we were able to design technology more intuitively in ways that design these technologies with the people that are going to use them, perhaps we wouldn't have to spend so much time and money training and supporting people. And so my love of human-centered design was born. I was a human-centered designer for a while. It was really successful. We started to apply human-centered design to things that weren't even technology related. I went into strategy for a while as a result and applied human-centered design over even bigger challenges, like how do you structure an organization, sell to clients, run the operations of a company. And then I ended up landing back in technology after having been in strategy. I really wanted to come back. There was a lot of interesting stuff again happening in the tech space. And so the company that I was with was like, well, why don't you go run our technology team? And hence that's how I ended up as a CIO. I've had 2 CIO roles, one that was Asia-based up in Hong Kong, and then one back here with Charter Hall in Australia. And then that's kind of where I am now. I finished up there about a year ago and have spent a year of my life now in as chair of a board and running a not-for-profit.
Okay.
It's been quite a fun journey.
Sounds it. And just going back to the beginning of that story, so journalism, what was the attraction to journalism to start with? And then the transition from a very non-technical role into a technology-centered role was more about knowing what good looks like. What advice would you give to our listeners who maybe started in a different industry but wanted to transition into more of a technical role? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think actually a few things. So I always say to people, don't follow the position and don't follow the ladder, follow the passion and follow the purpose. So journalism for me was very much around telling people stories, right? And actually helping people understand the world. And technology for me has always been about helping people interact with the world in ways that are more intuitive and frictionless and that solve their problems. And so even though the domains are different, the passion and the purpose is quite similar. And I think increasingly now technology roles are getting less and less technical. Sure, we absolutely still need and value highly technical skills, but a lot of the leadership roles, a lot of project management and business analysis is all about actually curiosity and empathy and engagement and sitting with the problem and helping people work through their problems. There's a lot that goes on in technology that actually doesn't require a lot of technical know-how, but I do think there is still a reticence to get involved in technology because people assume that you have to have a technology background to get into technology, and I don't know that that's always true.
I agree. I think a lot of technology is around understanding the problem and communicating it and absorbing that information, then passing it to the potentially more technical teams as well. Would you class yourself as somebody who's got technical capability? Obviously, moving into journalism, to a tech role, was there a period of upskilling? And did you
Absolutely?
How did you approach that? What was it? Was it formal qualifications or on the job? What advice would you give to people who are looking to take that journey?
Yeah, I would say a bit of column A and a bit of column B. So I did do formal certification in things like project management, so I could get the nuts and bolts of those skills. But a lot of my learning was on the job. It was working with teams of other people that had done that job and done it a lot longer than me, asking questions, watching what they did, trying to find my way by looking at the role models around me. So I think a lot of learning actually does happen that way. It happens kind of by osmosis, by being involved in teams. So it's incredibly important, I think, especially when you're younger in your career, to choose organizations not that just are going to pay you more, but are actually going to invest in helping you build those skills, whether it is through formal training or whether it's by having a culture that values learning and values contributing to other people's learning.
Yeah. And what were the big challenges, I suppose, coming from a non-technical background into a technical I suppose, structure or function within the business, and also being a massive advocate for DE&I, and that's how we met each other. I think in that area, very much a male-dominated environment. So what challenges did you come up against initially, and how did you overcome them?
I think not having a technology background for particularly some roles within technology, perhaps there's a lack of respect for you not having risen through the ranks in that way. And I think what I've always tried to build in the teams that I've built is this awareness and also appreciation for the differing backgrounds, experiences, skills, capabilities that are required for the average technology team to not just survive, but to thrive. And so I've always surrounded myself with fantastic talent in terms of being able to do their job so that I can do my job. And what I bring to the table is what I bring to the table. Everyone brings something different. And if you can structure those teams to not just bring the different technology skills, capabilities, backgrounds, but also lived experiences, and expertise, then that's magic, right? If you have a team that all are very good at doing the same thing and think in the same way, you're not going to go anywhere very, very quickly. You'll make really quick decisions, that's for sure, because you'll think the same. I think what I've been able to cultivate during my career and the things that I'm most proud of when I look back on my career are the teams that I've built that have had all of that diversity brought to the table. But it was a challenge in the beginning, right? Because I had inherited at least one team that didn't have a lot of diversity. And so me coming in as the non-technical person, was a bit of a mountain to climb, but we got there.
And with your background, I suppose that adapts your mindset in terms of looking for people who've come from the non-traditional backgrounds. Outside of, I suppose, technical skills, what do you look for people that you hire? If you look at yourself and what you had and what you brought to the table at the end of your career and the opportunities people gave you and what they saw in you, what do you look for in people that you hire outside of, I suppose, the classic technical skills that might have?
Yeah, I actually think the technical skills are third on my list of
What's
Three. There we go. Well, the first thing is values. So even though I love putting together very diverse teams, the one thing that unites us always is our values, because I am a human-centered designer, I'm a human-centered leader. And so I'm looking for curiosity, empathy, creativity, care. Like these are sort of unique human traits that I'm always interviewing for during that recruitment process. I'm looking for ways that people can show me that and evidence that those values are important to them. And then the second thing I would be looking for is, can I connect what we're passionate about, what our purpose is, to their passions and purposes? Because it's going to be really hard to drive momentum, engagement, passion in a team if you can't connect those passions. So at Charter Hall, it was things like net zero, or how do we be at the forefront of the future of work coming out of COVID? Like, how do we design offices that actually are hubs of collaboration? How do we do that for ourselves first so we can show it to all of our tenant customers? They're really fun challenges to be at the forefront and pioneering in. And if I'm looking for people that are passionate about those things too, because then when you've got that, turning up to work every day isn't a chore.
Yeah.
Because you're connected to something bigger than fingers on a keyboard doing work, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think purpose for me is really important. And when I meet senior people as CIOs at that level and we talk about opportunities for them, first thing I ask them is, what's your purpose? What's your passions? Forget about the job title, forget about salary, like what's important to you. And it could be their family, it could be the environment, it could be D&I, it could be learning and development. And I think you align the purpose of that individual to where the organization is at that period in time and where they're going. And again, like you said, if you line those two things up, you get great synergies, you get the best out of people come to work happy, people are driven and motivated. That's, for me, that purpose piece is really important. So that's great to hear.
There's we did a piece with one of our teams around what is your purpose, and it was surprising to me how many of our younger people hadn't really thought about that, right? And so we stepped down to, well, what's your passion? Like, what are you passionate about? Like, what causes do you care about? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? How do you enjoy your time? What gets you into a state of flow, right? Where the world like slips away and you're just laser focused, like, because there's something in all of that you can connect to, even if someone doesn't have necessarily a calling in life. And then the second thing I would say about it is it pays you back in dividends. So I would say in my last 6 months in my last role, every person that I interviewed, when I asked, what brings you to sit in this chair today? Like, what's excited you about what you've read or learnt so far? D&I always came up, right? That they could see what we were doing in diversity, equity and inclusion, and they had connected with it, not just at the level of the head, but at the level of the heart, because maybe they had a non-binary child or their sister was transgender, and they could see like that our passion for D&I was something that they wanted to be involved with as well. So it has to be, the only thing I would say is it can't be forced, right? This has to be authentic. I authentically find a lot of joy in that space and feel like I have something I can contribute.
Yeah.
But I think for every leader, authentically working out what their purpose and passion is, whether it's work or something else, is really important.
I agree. And that DE&I piece we'll touch on later in the podcast, which I think is something you're passionate about, as am I, and that's how we originally connected. Just in terms of the CIO title, so you obviously journalism into technology. What drove you to want to become the leader of technology in a business, which is ultimately the kind of CEO title? What was the journey and purpose and driver to get you there?
I'm going to be really honest and say I didn't ever have a purpose to be a CIO. It kind of just happened by osmosis. But I was in a company that I deeply loved, right? And I felt like I'd run my course in my current role, and I felt like I had been following my passion and my purpose, but I hadn't exercised a lot of thought around a more structured approach maybe to my career. And I still didn't have any structure or plan, if I'm honest. I was like, well, I moved back here actually for a while. I'm like, well, I think I'm done with Shanghai. I might move home. And they're like, well, why don't you help like set up the Australian business? Fine. So I had a fantastic job doing that as well. And then I was like, oh, I think I might go back into technology. And they said, well, why don't you go run the technology team? Because when you're rolling out the strategy, it was, according to you, the hardest department to get over the line on the strategy. And so I just did it. And it was hilarious because I relocated myself back up to Hong Kong. And within months of taking that role, my organization, which had been a 12,000 person sort of underdog organization in our industry, was merged with probably its next biggest competitor to make the second largest real estate services company on the entire planet. So my 12,000 person company and my 3,000 person region suddenly became a 50,000 person company. And we had like 3 years to rip and replace all of the underlying infrastructure, core operating systems and what have you within that business. So it was manic, right? Like, so not only did I get my first CIO gig, I got a CIO gig on steroids, working for private equity. So there was no plan to get there, but I'm really glad that that's kind of what the universe provided because I've had a lot of fun being
lots of challenges, also lots of opportunities as well. And what kept you in that role, obviously in that position, and then moving on to Charter Hall for the CIO position there? What retained you in that title and attracted you to the Charter Hall role?
Yeah, it's interesting. I stayed in that role because actually all the work that we did in that mergers and acquisitions situation was like phenomenally interesting and important and a wonderful learning opportunity. I didn't know whether I would have gone for another CIO role, but when I was pondering what to do next, it was just a confluence of events where Charter Hall called. And I wasn't sold on the idea of moving back to Australia, but over the course of a mad week, I kind of met with everyone just about on the executive team. I totally fell in love with them, what they stood for, what they were trying to do in the world, and just their sheer ambition. And I like to live my life with a no regrets policy.
Yep.
And when I looked at myself in the mirror and I asked myself, am I going to regret not moving back to Australia and working with these people? The answer was an absolute yes. So I packed up my bags, packed up my apartment, and I moved back again. And like, what a great move. Like, it was just such a joyful, 5 years of my life.
And for someone that's, by their own admission, didn't intend to become a CIO, and it's, I suppose, just, just the journey that you came on to where you landed, for someone to do that and then become recognised as Australian Chief Information Officer of the Year for 2023 is a great achievement. What did that feel like for you to be recognised in your industry as the best CIO in Australia and kind of recognised by your peers? How did that feel to you?
Overwhelming, I think. It was so unexpected, but it sounds really strange because of the title of the award. It never felt like an award.
Okay.
For me, it felt like my team, because I think it's hard to apply for these awards. The only reason I ever did was because there's this group of senior female CIOs that call out other CIOs that are female about applying for the awards. Yep. And I dodge it every year and I get this guilt factor, right? Like, I said that I'd do it and I'm someone with integrity, and then I don't do it. And then I kind of just felt that in the year that I applied, my team had done all of this great work and they were recognised in other domains, but they had never been recognised in the technology domain, which is their domain. And so I forced myself through gritted teeth. And the only way I could frame up that nomination was to write a love letter to my team. And so I spent a whole day just writing all of the things that I was so proud of them for. And it must have been compelling because he had won that thing, but it was also a wonderful reminder of just how much we had done on so many levels, because people think that award is only about innovation, and it's not just about innovation. It's about leadership. It's about impact. And I'm on the judging committee now, so I absolutely know that on the inside. Like, the innovation is just part of it. And yes, they had done that, but it was the industry leadership on cyber and sustainable digitalization and DE&I. That's actually was so much of what I was proud of.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know, I remember submitting it and just feeling this amazing amount of joy and gratitude. And I remember on the night when they were counting down from 10 to 1, we got to number 3 and it said, sort of gave this preface, and I was like, oh my God, I got 3rd. And then it wasn't me in number 3. And then there's a video of it. I turn around to the person next to me and I'm like, I'm so embarrassed, they've forgotten us. Like, they've literally forgotten to include us. And then when we won number 1, it was just a game changer, just a moment of massive pride for all of us.
And it's interesting you say that. I think I'm a big follower of the CIO of the Year, and I know a number of CEOs end up in the top 50. And one thing I've noticed across everyone that's a winner in that, it's not about them, it's about the team, and it's about the people behind that enable them to become CIOs. So I think, as you kind of talked about, writing that love letter around your team, and they're the reason that you got to where you are, and they're the kind of support that you got where you are as well. So it's interesting to know that people at the top are very, very humble in that CIO space, and they recognize the support that enabled them to reach that recognition, not only for them but also for their team as well. Now you're on the other side of the fence. You're on the judging. How do you become a judge of the CIO of the Year? Is it a natural opportunity they give you because you won it, or is it something you kind of put your hand up for? How does that work?
Well, I was asked because I'd won it.
Okay.
But now I've asked if I can keep being on it, because it was actually a really joyful process. There's something really special about getting to read every single one of those nominations. It's not an easy job. It takes a very long time. But to sit down and read all of the great things that CIOs are doing around the country, I don't know, every day I devote a couple of hours to it for a few weeks, and just the joy that I would get out of that is amazing. I think we had an amazing winner in Kurt this year, but also Nicola and Gary, who are in positions 2 and 3. They're just doing incredible work for their organizations, and also outside of creating impact outside of their organizations. And that's something, to be able to be part of celebrating that is really special.
And what's the key, as we mentioned earlier, the key criteria in terms of reaching that CIO of the Year award? What does that look like for the people that aren't familiar with how that works and what the selection criteria are?
Yeah, so you write a nomination which is all about, things that you've done that are innovative, digital transformation and the like, how they came about, what impact they've had, either in the business, in the industry, or the market at large, and then also what's been done in the way of diversity, equity and inclusion. Okay. So we're looking at those all 3 areas in the judging area.
And obviously winning CIO of the Year and then transitioning out of the role into something different. What was it? What did it mean to you, and how's it affected your mindset around the next journey in your life and your career?
I think it's worthwhile pointing out it meant such a great deal to be a female. And when that it was so weird. It doesn't happen very often, I'm told.
Yeah, you won. It was 3.
There was, so Anna Fred won next CIO, and Carrie won next CIO. So the up and coming emerging CIO has only been running 2 years, and both years a woman has won it.
Yeah,
which is just fantastic. There was me, and then and Nicola was second this year, and then Angela. The amazing Angela Coble was inducted into the Hall of Fame. So, and I'm like, oh, seriously, it can't have worked out that way. And they're like, it totally did. This is all scored. And I've seen the scoring now. It's a very, very thorough and objective process. They're like, it just worked out that way. And that was really, really special for me. I think winning the award obviously gives you this incredible opportunity to build your network and build relationships. And it's kind of been interesting for me because I'm not in a CIO capacity at the moment, building those networks and relationships in a different capacity, and looking at ways that I can create impact out of winning that award. I mean, if even just 2 more women nominate that wouldn't have nominated next year, because they've seen that this is possible. Like that would be enough of an impact. But I've had these, like being chair now of a not-for-profit, a really wonderful opportunity to build my network, build relationships, and be doing the work that we're doing now.
And I think part of your application was a very interesting story and a very insightful story around Charter Hall and connection to the Mardi Gras. So could you share that story with us?
It wasn't actually the Mardi Gras. It was World Pride, which is the largest LGBT plus event that's held globally. And we'd won it, which is huge. And so World Pride was coming to Sydney. And I was the executive sponsor of CH Proud. So I always call that my gay job, which was my favourite job rather than my day job. And the committee had come to me and said, hey, we want your support basically what we want to do is we want to light up all of the buildings along the side of the Domain, because the Domain was the opening and closing ceremony location, and there was a bunch of other events running during the course of those 2 weeks. And I was like, okay, so how are we going to do that? So because all of those buildings are owned by different people, Charter Hall owns Chifley, but all of the others are owned by, owners that compete with one another quite aggressively. So you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to get a lighting partner. You're going to have to get, all of this will require the City of Sydney to, you have to do a development application and get them to sign off on it. And we've got how much time? And then you've got to find the budget, because this isn't going to be cheap. And I'm running through all of like the crazy like things that could go wrong and how they're going to fail. And I'm like mother hen. I'm like, I don't want them to fail. And then actually it was the greatest lesson in leadership for me, because I was like, my job as a leader is not to tell them that they're going to fail before they have. My job is to support them. Yeah. And that's what they've asked for. And so I'm like, great, what can we do? And I don't know how, like, I'm sure we got them the budget and we did all of this stuff, right? But it was, the Mardi Gras was part of, like, so that became the number one installation in the World Pride Rainbow City program, which was rainbows that were all over our city. You might remember during that time, the city was just covered in rainbows. Yep. That, what they did with all the other owners, became the number one installation for the Rainbow City program. And then they got 3 more. So 4 of the 45 Rainbow City installations that committee had helped make happen, which was incredible. And then Mardi Gras was at the end of World Pride. And so I will take this memory. I'll get emotional talking about it, but I'll take this memory to my grave, which was we're getting ready to dance down Oxford Street in hard hats, steel cap boots. And I'm not the youngest person. Yeah, totally. Like and high vis. So, and we're in the marshalling area, and I was with the chair of CH Proud and her now wife, and I was like, hey, look behind us, and we could see all of the buildings lit up, and I'm like, oh my God, anything is possible if, as a leader, you just get out of the way and help lift, right? And I made it, more importantly, to the end of Oxford Street without falling down or having a heart attack.
How were you having your feet the next day?
I went straight home to bed. I won't lie. There was no after party for me.
One of your proudest moments as a leader, like looking back and seeing what your team have achieved on that day?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. It's definitely top 5. Like just, I don't know. And it's beautiful working in property, right? Because you can do things at such a large scale. But it was really special.
And obviously, big advocate for DE&I and also leadership, which brings us into our kind of next topic, which is around the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion in building teams and how that brings, I suppose, outcomes to the business as well. So do you share your thoughts in terms of how you approach building that, that DE&I strategy within the teams and the value that you've seen with it over the years?
Yeah, I think sometimes with DE&I, we focus on the D and we forget about the E and the I. So obviously it's about bringing people, with different lived experiences together. I know that the buckets of, First Nations, gender, LGBT plus have really served us to get to this point. But actually, diversity is not just about having that diversity of those buckets and all of that lived experience. It's about actually finding ways to step beyond those buckets and actually create an environment which is inclusive, right? Where we seek out other people's opinions, where we get curious about their lived experience. I mean, actually, there's a point at which having the buckets actually works against us. Like in my work as executive sponsor at CH Proud, actually, I had conversations with some people who were like, I don't want to have that label on me. I don't want my sexuality to be the thing that is the focus. I want people to focus on my contribution and the value and my passion and what I've got to add. And fair enough. I don't want to be labeled a woman. And so that's therefore the reason I'm in a CIO role. I want people to find my background interesting and find my contribution interesting. And I want people to value that. So I think there's diversity, like get the diversity in the room, but then it's really around inclusivity. How do we actually step beyond the labels and see people with all of their deep fabric and uniqueness and value it? I mean, we don't have to talk about why that matters. I mean, every research report you'll read says that that's really important. And then I think the third component is really important, which is equity. In every team that I have managed, women to do the same job have been paid less on average. And so every leader needs to look at that and say that's not okay. It's not okay for a woman to be paid for 4 days a week and work a 5-day week when a man's paid for 5 days, right? It's we have to look at, are we actually solving for that equity conversation and creating equal opportunities for people to develop and be promoted and all of that good jazz.
What advice do you give to listeners who are in organisations who have got the right intention but maybe haven't got the balance right? What advice would you give to people around creating in conversations to get the balance right? Because I think speaking to a lot of people I know, you've got an amazing insight and thoughts around that, but there's a lot of organisations that are struggling to get that balance right. And so what would you give to people in the businesses that are struggling to get the balance right, that want to get the balance right, creating conversations? What would you say to those?
I think if you're really, really struggling to get it right, that's when the buckets do help. Yeah. Like actually just start measuring how far where that gap is so that you can actually start directing recruiters or your own recruitment activities and looking at what it is that you could offer those candidates. So I think that's really important. But when you have got the diversity, but you're struggling with the inclusion, and this is my journey as well, because I have had to grow a lot as a leader during, my time as an executive, adopting things like leader speaks last. Okay. Right? Like I still love rolling up my sleeves and getting in and solving problems, and that's not my job a lot of the time, but I have to be really mindful and intentional as a leader to not be the person who raises their opinion first, because status matters, right? And people, even if they have an environment where they can speak truth to power, often just won't, right? So I know I'm doing my job well when I don't speak and I encourage everybody in a room to speak, and I encourage people who normally wouldn't even get a chance to be in the room to be in the room. So I had this wonderful mentor in my last role who was 24 years of age, who taught me everything that I know about AI, right? It's like, I will do this for you if you will mentor me on AI and show me what all of this, what is a GAN, like show me that in operation, and like finding ways to bring people into the room is really important as well.
Okay, and talk to us about your not-for-profit work you're doing as well, and at the moment, share that story with us.
Yeah, I am. It wasn't mine to start with, but when the founder needed to take a break, I took it over with excitement. It's a Sustainable Digitalisation Project. So it's working within the built environment. So think real estate infrastructure, people who invest in real estate and infrastructure or manage those assets. Trying to build out conversation. We have a bi-monthly roundtable that gets together to discuss issues and challenges around how we digitalize and use digital technology and data in ways that are responsible and ethical and sustainable. And we've built out some frameworks and tools that can be applied, whether it's AI or any other form of technology or use of data, to deal with some of those issues like privacy, cyber, benefit to humanity, what are our purposes, have we disclosed them? So I was using those frameworks and tools in my last role. They're a fantastic way to make sure that you've actually thought through all of the ethical and some legal challenges. And our hope is that if we can get those broadly adopted across the built environment, that we're all going to be playing on a level playing field and that nobody does something unintentionally that actually tars the whole industry with a brush, an unethical brush.
How do you see that being received? So I think there's talk about privacy and protection. A lot of that's driven by regulatory requirements and laws, which are generally intended to protect individuals, but then protect companies, and I suppose the financial penalties around that as well. Things you talk around, I suppose, using technology for the best of humanity, sometimes that's pushed towards the back of the list because it's not a financially rewarding position to be in. So how do you educate companies and peoples in terms of the really important stuff, which is how technology affects humans and how kids and sort of teenagers in America and around the world and the impact of social media? How do you educate the people that really need to be educated about that? What's the challenges you see there?
Yeah, we've started this year producing thought leadership out of the roundtable. So we're dealing with topic-based stuff like job automation, digital inclusion. Most recently, we've been discussing how to maintain and build trust in an AI-informed world, because there's a lot of challenges that AI throws up in terms of people maybe adopting AI because they can rather than because they should. Yeah. And we've already seen some unintended consequences with some of the pioneers of using AI in terms of customer relationships, creating new risks within companies and the like. So we're doing a bit of thought leadership now. We have our roundtable who are incredible advocates for this work. And actually just the process of going through, whenever you're doing a digital deployment, of running through the framework and asking the questions in the framework is a fantastic way to just show you your blind spots. So we were doing it we've done it on 5 or 6 digital deployments, and every single time there's always a blind spot that we just, even with the most well-intentioned, educated team, you still miss things. And so having that backstop of a framework that you can go to and just run through in an hour to really think through all of these challenges is education in and of itself.
Okay, good to know. I think you obviously are very busy, and I think that brings us on what we want to talk about now, which is it can be a little bit of a sensitive topic, but around your burnouts, which I think you're quite open about, and where you got to. So just, if I think people who are listening who obviously wouldn't be too familiar, what brought you to the point of having burnout? What was it that kind of led you there, and how did you recognize that you were actually the point of burnout, and how did you, I suppose, go on that journey of self-healing?
Yeah, so it was a while ago now. I had been working around the clock on this M&A, post-M&A technology integration. And so just to put that into context, for 3 years of my life, I was constantly on a plane, so didn't know what time zone I was in a lot of the time. And during the weeks, because it's a global organization and we had a lot on, right? We're working 5 a.m. till 10 or 11 at night. So just not getting enough sleep, not eating well, definitely not exercising. Who had time for that? And you know what? It was fine. I felt fine all the way until I woke up one morning and I just wasn't. I had what's called adrenal fatigue. It feels, for anyone that's had glandular fever, it feels a lot like glandular fever. You get up in the morning and then you just can't function. And that's just because your body will keep giving you adrenaline and cortisol to try to manage the stresses that you're putting on it. But there's a point at which the receptors blow out and you can't function anymore. So I definitely knew I had burnout because I couldn't function. And so it was a really slow process of healing from that. It took a while just to get back to functional. But it's a really, it's something I'm really passionate about now as a leader. You're not doing your job as a leader if you're leading. That was an exceptional situation because of the work that we're doing. But in terms of just day to day, if your people are getting to that point, it's because we haven't done our job in prioritizing or resourcing. Because the long-term impacts of having something like adrenal fatigue for me have been really significant. So I've got a bunch of autoimmune problems now as a result of pushing my blood, like emptying my cup to that degree. Anxiety, I never had anxiety before, and it was something that I had to grapple with in those years after being burnt out. So I think it's really, really important for me now as a leader to make sure that that's not ever something that has a chance to happen. And I didn't even have like all of the other stresses that people have around raising young families or caring for their parents, right? Like we have to really look at the whole of people's lives and say how much pressure is positive before it tips over into being negative. And I've learned a lot of self-regulation as well. I am now a lot more reflective of what I take on in my own life.
And you mentioned you felt fine until that one morning when you woke up, and that's when it kind of really hit. Looking back, was there any red flags, any signs that you thought that's actually, looking back, that was actually an opportunity for me to maybe slow down? As those people who are listening who are maybe feeling they might be getting there, is there anything advice you can give to people who tend to look out for this? This is what you need to be aware of.
Well, I was finding myself becoming a whole lot more reliant on things like caffeine. So, and now you'll never find me drink more than one cup of coffee every day, although I love it. But I was becoming really reliant on those things. I was getting insomnia. So in the few hours that I had to sleep between calls, I couldn't sleep. Like my body had given me too much adrenaline, and I did start to feel anxiety when that wasn't a normal state for me. Those things were all happening in the lead up. Yeah.
And you, as it realigned, I suppose, what's important to you? I think everyone puts, most of the attention people generally put in their lives is, a lot of it is into work. But I suppose, as you mentioned earlier, there's kind of families, there's kind of mums and dads, there's kids, there's pets, there's your health. So personally, I'm a big believer in terms of the people that work underneath me. Like, we're very focused on work, but that's not who we are. And when you've got issues outside of work, whether it's kind of young kids or sick parents or anything else maybe related to your mental health, for me, I take work away from them. I was like, you need to focus on yourself. You need to get yourself better. Like, work's great, but that's not life. Like you need to focus on what's important to you. Has that reassessed, I suppose, moving forward in the next stage of your life? Is work still as important to you, or have you got other priorities that you feel have come to the forefront after going through that burnout process?
For me, money was never my driving factor. It was always passion and purpose. And I've just taken a year out of my life from doing full-time paid work so that I could actually reflect on, am I on the right track still? Is this the contribution that I want to make to the world? And I've gone through this amazing year of my life. It's been such a gift of really looking at what drives that inability to say no to things. Because even when I moved back here and changed my whole life, like Charter Hall tried to keep me on the hook, right, about me having work-life balance. And I still went and took on crazy stuff like being a UTS lecturer and like vice chair of the PCA cybersecurity roundtable and SDP and everything else. Like, I just take on too much stuff.
Yep.
So in this year, I've had this beautiful chance to reflect on what drives that. Why do I keep doing this to myself? And actually, the thing that has fundamentally shifted for me is an understanding of my whole life, and as much as this doesn't sound like a gift, in a way it has been a gift. My stepfather has been very sick this year. So I've had this time to spend with him as well, and building a relationship, a much deeper connection with my loved ones. So whole of life. And then, I've had this real freedom around, I'm a bit type A sometimes and I like to compete. But I've given up I just don't even compete anymore. I've given up even comparison. I'm running my own race. I'm doing the things that fill my cup. I want to work on the areas where I think I can add the most value, and where I think my contribution to the world is. And part of that is the Sustainable Digitalisation Project. Part of it is now starting to advise companies on human-centred digital transformation and how to design holistic digital transformations that take into account both the customer and the employee experience, so that we can and to co-create, so we can actually get to solutions that make sense, with the technology just being the enabler, but the people and their work and their process being up front. So I feel like it's a gift and not everyone gets it, but this chance to reflect has helped me solidify where that contribution needs to be going forward. I won't ever say never on another CIO gig, but it will have to be deeply connected to my values and my passion and my purpose.
I think that realignment you've had over the last year, I think taking time out to travel, focusing on the sustainability piece, which is amazing and very important to you, and then obviously spending time with loved ones. Returning to potential kind of work in the future, how would you keep those boundaries of work life and making sure that they don't sneak back into some of the habits that kind of got you to burning out?
Sam, this is $1 million question. Because I feel great now, right? Because I haven't had all of the pressures that we normally have when we're in executive roles. So it is the $1 million question. I think for me, part of what I've established, which I think is really important for people in general, is I've started a morning ritual. So I have a ritual in the morning. I start the day off well with meditation, and I eat well, and I exercise, and I set my day up every day in the right way. That, for me, particularly the meditation component, that mindfulness and bringing intention to my day, is going to be really important in terms of keeping those boundaries, right? Because it's and then watching myself on the amount of times that I'm saying yes, right? So I think that mindfulness in the morning and really starting to think through, how do I want to spend the day? What do I get to do today? Is that what I want to be able to get to do?
Yeah.
It is really important.
Have you any firm decisions in terms of what's next for you? Or are you still, I suppose, seeking out what that might look like?
Well, definitely I'm continuing with the non-profit. That work fills my cup. And then advisory. I'm doing some coaching work as well. Advising. Is sort of where I'm at the moment. Hopefully maybe some more travel at some point as well, because that 3-month trip overseas was quite special.
Yeah, I'm sure. And you've got an amazing wealth of experience, lots of stories and lots of interesting journeys you've been on. So that advisory piece is probably a natural transition for you to share those experiences and advise companies and organizations and people in terms of what they should be doing. So I can see that's a natural journey for you.
It's in a way, and maybe it harks back to your question about what it meant to win CIO of the Year. There was something really special about, I've always felt like a square peg in a round hole in the CIO community, because I didn't come up through the ranks in the same way as everyone did, but to be respected by my peers for having a very human-centered way of doing things was like, there's a difference between being on the outer and just being different, and that different being valued. And I think so often now we approach digital transformation focused on the technology and not on the humans, and it's actually a way easier path to tread on the human-centered way. But I just don't know that a lot of people have had exposure to that. Maybe they've run into design thinking and a bit like Agile. They've tried to tick the boxes on doing daily stand-ups and post-mortems, but they haven't quite connected with the rationale and the reason, the why of human-centered. And so, it's really joyful work. And I love seeing aha moments when I advise and do that work. Yeah. I love seeing people connect. So many people in technology, their passion is actually solving people's problems, but we forget about the people and we just think about the technology. So it's nice seeing people connect when they are co-creating and doing human-centered design with that passion. So
clearly you're passionate about as well.
Yeah. So it's still new, relatively. It's for me, it's been since, the early parts of the 2000s. But for others, they're still quite new to the concept. And so, it's kind of fun helping them explore it.
Amazing. Great to hear. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Sheridan's been an amazing guest, and just want to say thank you to her for sharing her stories today. I think what we've taken away from today is really the journey that you, to a CIO, doesn't necessarily have to come from a technology background. The value of DE and I in an organization with the people and also with teams, and driving purpose as part of your career to get you where you want to. Also, thank you, Sheridan, for being vulnerable and talking around your burnout journey, but also what you learned from it and some advice to my listeners who may be on the same journey and what to look out for. And then also thank you to Sheridan for sharing, I suppose, her learnings from that burnout in terms of where she is today and what's going to be next for her in her journey in her career as well. So with that in mind, as always, I'd like to throw the mic back to Sheridan. What is the one bit of advice you wish you could give to your younger self early in your career if you could?
I think everybody else feels like an imposter too. Like that means that you're different enough. Go and be different. As companies, we spend so much time working out how to differentiate ourselves. Feeling like an imposter is usually because you're already differentiated. So use it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Please like, comment and share. And I look forward to seeing you on my next episode. Thank you.